Rejection of the truth, Jesus is Lord.
God is an all-consuming fire, burning away all false desires.
Yeah, he's gonna burn it away, the holy furnace ablaze.
Hello, brothers and sisters. Here I am again with a controversial question. Have you ever heard of this idea that we really need to let tongue be spoken in church? That any type of questioning tongue speaking is wrong, because that's what Paul said, that there be tongues. Now, of course, I'm not here to speak for or against such things, to say which one is and isn't real tongues. I'm just here to come back to the text and let the verse speak for itself. Now, of course, we have to look at that special verse that is in 1 Corinthians chapter 14 in its proper context. We have to remember the whole chapter is about tongue speaking, actually. Paul really teaching us what is, it isn't, and how it should be applied. So that's the main idea. It's Paul speaking and teaching about what and how tongues should be used. My focus will be on the really ending part where he's going to finally put it all together and say, okay, this is what it means. Yeah? This is the application of what I've taught you. That's when he speaks of, we should not hinder tongues. And depending on the translation you use. And it's in that context, that application, that we'll understand what he's saying. So let's read it together. It starts all the way in verse 26. It says, "What then, brothers? When you come together, each one has a hymn, a lesson, a revelation, a tongue, or an interpretation. Let all things be done for building up." That's important. "If any speaking in a tongue, let there be only two, or at most three, and each in turn, and let someone interpret." So those are the rules that Paul is laying out right now. One or two or three, max, one after the other, and somebody to interpret what he is saying, or she. "But if there is no one to interpret, let each of them keep silent in church and speak to himself and to God. Let two or three prophets speak, and let the others weigh what is said. If a revelation is made to another sitting there, let the first be silent." So yeah, it's one after the other, sharing what God is giving through His Spirit. I won't even discuss how we all apply this. I'm just saying he's talking about order. He then continues by saying, "For you can all prophesy one by one, so that all may learn and all be encouraged." Do recognize that's the point. Edifying, encouraging, teaching, learning, it's all about that. That's the point of the hymns you choose, the lessons you give, the prophesying you give, or the speaking tongues you give. It's all to teach, encourage, edify others. He then continues and says, "And the spirits of prophets are subject to prophets, for God is not a God of confusion, but of peace." That should sink in very deeply, because that's entirely the context, the way he's applying what he's said before he even gets to that famous verse. And we'll skip down to verse 36 to really get to what he is saying. Now, I'm skipping over the part about women being silent because I would say that's a subject for another time. We will focus on where he's getting at. He's finally saying, if there's anything they desire to know, cut. Continue by saying, "Or was it for you that the word of God came? Or are you the only ones it has reached? If anyone thinks that he is a prophet or spiritual, he should acknowledge that the things I'm writing to you are a command of the Lord." So you might say right now, I have the Spirit as well, and He's guiding me in certain ways, and I got certain messages, or certain things I want to share with people. But if it contradicts what Paul is saying, what Paul says, don't you recognize what I'm giving you are commandments of the Lord? This means it must be done this way. He then finally says, if anyone does not recognize this, he is not recognized. Ouch. So, my brothers, earnestly desire to prophesy and do not forbid speaking in tongues. That's when he finally says it. So, for everybody that really likes to hold to that last part, don't stop people speaking in tongues. Don't stop them. They're forgetting everything else Paul said and why he gets to that. It's like, yes, let them speak in tongues if it's in that proper way. And it's in that proper way that's encouraging, edifying, and teaches others. That's why many scholars today are saying this speaking in tongues was God revealing truth in different languages for if anybody would be coming in like a Mede or Perd or a Greek and he could hear it in his language, this truth of God. And if there's no one who speaks that language who can share this truth of God, who can edify other people, then it's not useful right now. The same way prophesying, which is also very misunderstood nowadays, because we focus so much on the fact that it's all about knowing future events and forgetting that for the most part, throughout the entirety of the Bible, Old and New, prophesying is God speaking his truth to his people, teaching them through the prophets and then through the apostles. But now he's finished teaching, we call it the canon, we call it the Bible. So he's not revealing new truth. Now, yes, in that there are moments when these prophets will speak about coming things, coming events, but that's just to prove that their message was from God. And the main message was the teaching of his commandments, his laws, what was his will. So that's why, again, it's all about teaching to encourage, so they can learn, so they can be edified, so they will know how to serve God. All done one after the other, all in a way that is a blessing to others. So yes, we should not forbid speaking in tongues in that context. Well, if not, Paul would say, even if you think and you say, I have the Spirit and he's leading me differently, you don't recognize that God mandated him, equipped him, led him, inspired him to give us the commandments of how it should work. Now, as he says, does not recommend you before God. And with that said, and it was a bit of a longer one this time, but I hope it was a blessing and just brought you to really think biblically about what this tongue speaking is about. That said, be blessed, brothers and sisters.
Somebody come on.
The Lord in the mountains and rocks to be falling. Please don't refuse the one who's calling you.
He's calling you. He's warning you.